Hello, my name is Catalina Imizcoz. I'm very pleased to be here. I wanted to thank the organizers, and I'm very much looking forward to the panel discussion on decolonizing the canon. My paper is titled The Modern Paradigm, the Exhibitionary Form, and Our Epistemological Crisis. Fashion Parade cum Art Exhibition, Soy un disfraz de tigre, Acto 1, lasted 11 minutes. It took place on the 1st of October 2019 at the Teatro San Martín in Buenos Aires. When the music began, a first model appeared at the top of the orange line staircase, framed by golden handrails and dressed in monochrome blue. It looked like a mistake. His outfit and pose hinted at that of maintenance personnel, and one might have felt that infamous live performance panic in the audience when lights go on before the backstage crew have left the stage. In less than half a minute, the first artwork was being presented, to reactions of relief and incipient confusion. This parade exhibition conjured up links to modernist display structures of the 20th century. In the model's gestures of lifting the framed pictures to different heights, it referenced experimental designs such as Herbert Bayer's extended fields of vision. His 1935 diagram depicting an eye man at the center of a kaleidoscopic display proposed to present the viewer with artworks in a 360-degree hexagonal space. Because the audience was seated and the mobile artworks were distributed across the space, Soy un disfraz de tigre embodied a dispersed version of Herbert's design, articulating an extended field of vision of its own. By minute 3, one of the models had taken a seat on a blue sofa, leaning the photograph on the armrest, its top section brushing against his arm. A black and white polyptych was being put together simultaneously, 4 works aligning swiftly to form a single piece. Interactivity and tactility burst throughout the exhibition space, even if the audience did not actually touch any of the art. Lina Bobardi's 1950s glass display structures at the Museo de Arte de Sao Paulo exude a similar quality. While touching is out of bounds, the ethereality of the supporting forms, in this case transparent glass instead of human bodies, conveys a contradictory feeling of accessibility. Another landmark of exhibition design, in Lissitzky's abstract cabinet from 1927, sliding panels were devised to reveal artworks one by one, simultaneously creating an illusion of touch and playfulness. In these modernist experiments with the exhibitionary form, a modular quality is favored over the static and remote conventional hangings of traditional art museums. The kind of genealogy mapped out here offers a tiny glimpse into the relations that can be drawn to connect exhibition design experiments across history. It could be extended further to include multidisciplinary references. Most poignantly, perhaps, Salkowitz's career-long involvement with the fashion industry suggests a strong link between Soy un disfraz de tigre, Acto 1, and designer Mary Tapia's trailblazing fashion show at the Colmena Gymnasium in Buenos Aires in 1967, where young female models dressed in Tapia's hybrid designs interacted with sport props and male bodybuilders. Both artists use the human body as an architectural element that allows them to upset the standard conventions of these type of events within their respective fields. And yet, returning to art shows in particular, the argument here is that there is a habit of thought that takes exhibition as a transparent construct, and it perpetuates a theoretical agreement under which the exhibitionary form is glossed over. Recent museographic approaches have placed emphasis on exhibition design, continuing the work of expographic studies and attributing value to the culture and heritage attached to the distribution of elements across the space of the exhibition. Multidimensional, encompassing architecture, the curatorial, graphic, and lighting design, museography's scope, in turn, tends to stop at the formal and material elements of the exhibitionary form without questioning or problematizing the ideological infrastructure of which these are a part. Exhibition studies, on the other hand, has focused widely on replicating the canonic impulses of its umbrella discipline, art history, with only selected studies directing their efforts towards the full implications of the exhibitionary form's implicit scripts. One of the most recent is the research project and anthology Theatre Garden Bestiary from 2019 that provides a transdisciplinary history of the exhibition as an epistemic site. The introduction to the book groups the subsequent 22 presentations with the aim of, quote, isolating the historical construction of a set of epistemological, aesthetic, and ontological scripts, which enables us to grasp the implicit contracts encoded in the exhibition form, end quote. These material histories offer a fundamental site from which to unpack the exhibitionary form. My approach to such histories takes a similar point of departure, but diverges in as far as it looks to articulate a critique of Western-centric contracts embedded in the exhibitionary form. It aims to move beyond tracing origins to examine impossible deconstructions of the hegemonic exhibitionary form. While speculative in tone, the analysis of one-person exhibitions such as Salkovitz makes it possible to identify alternatives to the modern colonial exhibition. Critiques of modernity are far from new. In fact, they abound to what amounts to our current epistemological crisis. While the literature that critiques modernity from the disciplinary perspectives of sociology, history, anthropology, and science studies, or through post-colonial, decolonial, feminist, or post-natural thinking, has been widely adopted within artistic and curatorial practices, it has seldom been used to critique exhibition design and the ideological basis of museological and museographical apparatus, including their spatial habits, props, idiosyncrasies, and material traditions. That is, to critique the exhibitionary form. In 2010, Bruno Latour pointed out that the new red Tunis ecosystem extended to both President Sarkozy and the sushi bars of the whole planet, as opposed to being limited to a specific chain of predators and prey. This contemporary cosmos chimes with the spirit of 16th century cabinets of curiosities, both literally and metaphorically. Latour comments on how this early Renaissance epistemic paradigm feels closer than ever in the 21st century. Characteristic of such paradigms were the odd and disseminated relationships that tied micro and macro cosmoses and connected human and non-human in broad networks that Donna Haraway's string figures, SF, illustrate. All manifestos include a call, which in Latour's case is for compositionism. Quote, it is time to compose in all the meanings of the word, including to compose with, that is, to compromise, to care, to move slowly with caution and precaution, end quote. Compromise is a word that makes itself present in the work of another Argentinian artist, Adrián Villarrojas. So too is composing or composting, as Caroline Christoph Bakariev calls it. An electrifying incarnation of Latour's call for arms, one of Villarrojas' recent exhibitions within the Theatre of Disappearance project took place in Athens in 2017. The artist proposed to include the planting of several thousand specimens in the grounds of the Observatory, that is, on the protected archaeological site of the Hill of the Nymphs. Compromise on a material level took the shape of a wooden crate, laid out on top of the revered soil to form a gigantic planter that provided both a fertile space and an irrigation system for the corn, wild grasses, pumpkin, watermelons, and more. Beyond this practical realization, this soil settlement between the institutions that were part of the exhibition creates also a theoretical framework that permeates the whole exhibition. This framework upsets the Western disciplinary logic that dictates the value and obliged conservation of archaeological elements, while it respectfully lays a cloak of suspended time and tons of soil between the old and emergent forms. thrusting corn encounters the hegemonic epistemic structures of archaeology. Demarcated and protected zones, as well as detailed protocols to dictate the finding, classification, handling, and conservation of objects and their fragments. Alive and feral, the corn and its fellow plants occupy their space, absorb their energy, extend their stalks, and exude their oxygen. It is pulsing corn colonizing the space of one of Western civilization's core disciplines. Villarrojas presented a cosmos, through which the previously landscaped gardens, calmly standing for the modern concept of nature, were replaced with a maze of vegetation. In the Athens exhibition, the public could choose to follow one of two main routes, one leading to the National Observatory building and another to the area of the caves. Populated by 11 vitrines fitted into the rocky and sandy terrain, the caves were a hidden zone of the Hill of the Nymphs that had remained unvisited for decades. A spirit of discovery lingered in the site and permeated the vitrine's contents, which showed a variety of emblems of conquest, a replica of NASA's Curiosity rover, flags of Imperial Japan and the United States, but also teenage sneakers and graffiti. Different forms of colonialism loomed over the presentation: terrestrial, xenophobic, age-related, fossilized. The vitrines, read in conjunction with the throbbing corn, ask if violence is a requisite of conquest, or if that has simply been the way we, as a species, have come to perform it. Quote, "There is no morality in a lion devouring a deer," end quote, Villarrojas once posited, just as there is none in the corn taking over the Hill of the Nymphs. Discovery, conquest, and imperialism are common threads running through the theater of disappearance, yet without a direct critique or moral judgment towards its perpetrators. Colonialism's binary logic has recently been unpacked as part of sociologist Buenaventura de Sousa Santos' Epistemology of the South. In defining modern Western thinking as abyssal thinking, Santos conceptualizes the impossibility for both sides of the line to be co-present. The power of this side of the line, as Santos calls it, lies in the possibility of, quote, exhausting the field of relevant reality, end quote. The other side of the line is void of any ontological value. Thinking in these terms, knowledge is divided into, quote, acceptable knowledges, science, philosophy, theology, and, quote, non-existent ones, beliefs, opinions that can't be confirmed by positivism, intuitions that belong to the world of magic. Similarly, there is a legal cartography, the social contract created not only a metropolitan civil society, but also a huge state of nature imposed on millions that live outside the territory of this law. Lawlessness, as well as the incomprehensibility of the non-existent knowledges, are, according to Santos, products of the abyssal lines that gradually take shape in historical treaties that justify the invasion and colonization of the Americas. In the dissolution of the limits that separate moral good and evil, Villarrojas' exhibition forges an epistemic paradigm that no longer follows the abyssal lines of the modern world. Rather than playing with categories that this side of the line has on offer, Villarrojas constructs a world where the invisible agencies and agents in Santos' abyssal thinking, the corn, the caves, the energy of the sun, are made manifest. The exhibition exists and responds to a different ontological basis. The other route that could be followed across the Hill of the Nymphs led to the building of the National Observatory. This part of the exhibition spoke to the historical compromise negotiated in 1846, when Athens was barely a city and the observatory took priority as a site that helped consolidate its status as a place of discovery, of classic civilization and Western culture, as well as a place of erasure of the remnants of the Ottoman Empire. in building their first research institution, the Greeks confirmed their standing in the West and as a proponent of progress and science. This historical compromise integrates the framework or foundational myth of Villarrojas's project. The building was stripped bare of the instruments and documents that it normally houses. Instead, a white, true-to-life model of the observatory was installed in a room lined with thick curtains. The model was mysterious, firstly because it showed the building that the viewer stood in while contemplating it, but also because it went back in time, showing the newly born and barren site of the observatory surrounded by an incipient city of Athens. The artist has used curtains in previous works, notably in Two Suns in 2015 at Marian Goodman Gallery in New York, to seclude the space of the work, and as Villarrojas himself has explained in an interview, to avoid the uncomfortable situation of, quote, being watched as you watch. The way they meticulously cover the space, sealing off the outside world with their maroon thickness, is reminiscent of the dense curtains famously employed by Adolf Loos to secure a similar level of intimacy in his wife's bedroom. The comparison touches on the question of control. While Villarrojas claims to have installed the curtains to give the audience some privacy, Loos's architecture famously allowed the owner of the property a vantage point from which to keep its visitors in check. The National Observatory was built to study the cosmos and is an institution of modern research and positivist discovery. And yet, in the upsetting of dynamics of conqueror and conquered that run throughout the exhibition, the curtains that frame the model of the observatory ask whether humankind is the one mastering its object of study, or if the cosmos has always been in control instead. Beatriz Colomina disentangles the wonders of Loos's design and is cited by Paul Preciado in Architecture as a Practice of Political Disobedience, an article from 2012. He quotes, I quote from him, Beatriz Colomina was one of the first architectural historians to register the impact of performative and post-structural feminist theories in architecture. Architecture, she argues in Sexuality and Space, is not simply a platform that accommodates the viewing subject. It is a viewing mechanism that produces the subject. It precedes the occupant, end quote. Preciado unpacks the effects spaces have on the bodies that occupy them, and how the history of those spaces, the ideology and the rationale that gave way to their particular configuration is not neutral. Such biased spaces has a twofold effect on the space's morphology and on the subject that occupies it. The exhibitionary form and both Salkovitz and Villarrojas's exhibitions are examples of these mechanisms. In the way they disarticulate the standard forms of exhibitions, each artist opens up a space to think about how architecture and form frame and determine what is included and excluded from their ontological basis. Quote, we're going through a period of epistemological crisis. We're experiencing a paradigm shift of technologies of inscription, a mutation of collective forms of the production and archiving of knowledge and truth, end quote, Preciado argued at the beginning of 2017. The exhibition as epistemic site, one where the production and perpetuation of a truth regime takes place, has had a growing role in contemporary culture as modern times progressed. The birth of the art exhibition as a cultural form is coterminous with the dawn of European modernity, which explains why ideas of classification, taxonomy, conservation, and archive are equally integral to both. These forms of rationality are indivisible from the spatial or concrete devices they materialized into. Just like architecture produces its occupant, so too does the exhibition spatialize the knowledge system it is subsumed by. In the morphologic gestures of Salkovitz and Villarrojas, it is not only the spatial configuration that is being reconstructed, but more importantly, the foundations that underpin it. If the presumed inanimism of the walls can be overcome by parading human beings, then the wider dichotomies that constitute the exhibition, not only between animate and inanimate objects, but also between form and content, subject and object, male and female, white and black, expert and ignorant, are also blurred. In manipulating these binary logics, which are foundational for the modern worldview, Salkovitz is questioning the extent to which the whole of the modern exhibition can continue to house the art she wishes to create. The epistemological shift that occurs at the level of the exhibitionary form validates an art object that is not encased in representation, but exists in the everyday. In other words, in Salkovitz's worldview, art is part of the design of life, ineffably present in the photograph of a leg, as well as in the leg that mimics its gesture, as much in what can be seen as that which hides from view. Non-human bodies play a similar role in Villarrojas' show. The epistemological break occurs at one of modernity's primary binary splits. Nature and culture, both with capitals, are cross-contaminated. Colonialism is divested of morality and performed by rovers, pumpkins, and Observatory alike, while nature is animated and given center of stage as artwork. The string figures at the basis of 16th century cabinets of curiosities provide the theater of disappearance with a paragon, much more so than the separation of object and subject linked to modern exhibitions. If the exhibitionary form can be used to critique modernity as a socio-cultural phenomenon, it has so far been done through the lens of individual artistic practices. Artists like Salkovitz, Villarrojas have been reconfiguring the space of the exhibition forever. And yet the question that endures is whether such efforts can continue to remain within the realm of artistic practices, or if they can transcend to an institutional level, opening up new ritual possibilities. In resisting the automated resort to the modern exhibitionary form, the opportunity arises for other forms of art that are non-modern and non-Western to find the space that can host them. Thank you.